Hi, everyone, and welcome again to the Musical Innertube. I'm Don Rooney.
And I'm John Timpane.
And we have a repeat guest again on the Musical Innertube today. Abby Mahone was with us last year to talk about how you talk to your kids about that frantic, weird election that apparently Trump thinks is not over. And that was a good thing to talk to kids about, something I think that's even better to talk to kids about, and that is the pandemic and how we handle it, especially now that we're into the vaccine situation. And we're also into a situation where a lot of people think, hey, this is almost over, when medical experts say, no, it's not really. So, Abby, welcome back. And you have a friend with you today. Would you mind introducing her?
Absolutely. Hi, Don. Hi, John. Good to be here again. I'm particularly excited to be here because I am joined by my colleague, Courtney Hart. And Courtney is a wonderful resource at Harrisburg Academy. We do a lot of work together, so we're excited to be here today to talk together. Courtney, do you want to introduce yourself and tell everyone your job here at Harrisburg Academy?
Sure. And thank you, Abby, for introducing me. And thank you, Don and John, for having us on today. So I have the privilege at Harrisburg Academy of being the director of school counseling, social, emotional learning, and wellness, which is a very long title just to say that I'm here to be supportive and think about ways to help kids as they navigate growing up and walking through the schooling experience. I also get to help and support teachers and help and support families. So, I have a pretty privileged job of being able to just be a helper, which is great in lots of ways.
And we should mention, too, that the Harrisburg Academy is in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. It is a school that takes kids from kindergarten and actually preschool all the way up through high school. And it is an academy. It is a blue ribbon school, and it does a lot of good work. So let's start with the basic premise here, and maybe we'll start with Abby, and Courtney can join in if she'd like. And that is, let's talk about the kids talking about the pandemic. They've been living with it for just about a year now. Abby, how do you see kids rolling with the punches, or are they rolling with the punches?
Yeah, thank you, Don. You're right. It is almost exactly a year. I think we have one more week. This time last year was right when we were shutting schools down for the first time, for that long closure. And now we're a year later. So in my role as assistant head of school, and I also have oversight of the early childhood and lower school divisions at Harrisburg Academy as a school administrator, my job has very much been from, before a year now, longer than a year, looking at what was coming down the pike, frantically trying to read everything we could about what we were seeing in other countries to determine how we were going to prepare for what looked like could be a pandemic in the United States as well. March hit last year. We closed the campus, like all schools in Pennsylvania, at least. We closed and we finished the year with virtual learning. And then this year, Harrisburg Academy has been fortunate enough, being a small school, we've been able to fully implement all of the state of Pennsylvania's Department of Education, Department of Health, even the CDC guidelines in order to be open for in-person instruction, which not all schools have been able to do, rather. So both Courtney and I have had the opportunity over the last year to work to develop safety plans that we can be open and feel safe, but also guide our students and our families and our faculty through that process. And it's been a real challenge, a lot of big emotions, a lot of fear and anxiety surrounding it, a lot of frustrations and anger too. People want to be in school and they want it to be just like quote unquote normal. But unfortunately, we can't will that into being, So as the year has progressed, helping students and families feel comfortable to come back into the building, helping students grapple with big feelings and big questions about the world around them, whether they're safe, how their actions can keep their families safe. Is their family member who has COVID okay? All of those things are part of our daily lives. And the only consistent thing, honestly, is the fact that we never know what the next moment will bring. But I find, that the kids are incredibly resilient. And there's, of course, hard moments. But I remind myself and the faculty that as adults right now, as hard as this is, we also have the opportunity to model resilience for the children. We have the opportunity to model what does dealing with something really hard look like, so that they can see that. And as they grow up, they can take that and learn from it and be resilient, young people and adults. Unfortunately, life is hard. We don't know in what ways it's going to be hard. Right now, it's hard as a pandemic, but giving the children skills now, talking to them realistically about what they're seeing, honoring their feelings, their thoughts, their emotions, allows them then to process the world, and hopefully give them the skills to be able to do that more successfully as they grow up.
That's one of the things that I was thinking about in coming to this podcast this afternoon, is that this is an excellent example of an issue or a problem or a challenge to which there really isn't a single fix. A lot of it is about patience and maintenance and personal habits. And so it's hard. It's hard on everybody. In fact, the amount that we don't know for sure, which is still great. You hear adults constantly talking about it. I'm wondering how that uncertainty and that ambiguity, and it's full, this whole thing is fraught with both. How does that filter down into what you're hearing from your children, what they say they need?
Courtney, would you like to talk? I mean, I can certainly talk about the youngest students about that, but I'm curious also, Courtney, if you have a perspective on the middle and upper school students about that.
Yeah, I think that I think it's hard to give one concrete answer, because I think the truth is they also are all in different places, as they are in all kinds of ways. I think you see a spectrum of responses. Some of them needing more support than others. As is typical. And I think that I think it's ebbed and flowed, right? I think through different parts of this, there's been moments where it's been particularly more challenging. I think we just got, it's March. We just got through February in schools. It's kind of a hard month. And, usually I think it was particularly harder this year. But I think, kids thrive on certainty. They thrive on routine. They thrive on knowing what's coming next. And of course that's gone, right? Like in lots of ways. And so I think the more things we can put into play for them that they can expect, the more routine that they have, the better. And so as ways that we can provide that as a school and even in my, I think about it in my parenting. So I think, we also are looking for things for them to be hopeful and excited about, despite the things that they've lost. And we just recently, our middle and upper school students just recently, we had a conversation about ambiguous loss, right? As people. And so we can frame our mind around loss in ways that we can understand it. So like, if they lose a pet to death, or they, lose a family member who's passed away, they can make sense of that. But when we face ambiguous loss, which is like, it's nebulous, right? There's not one particular way to define it. It's a lot harder. So we've been doing some education sessions on that to help them understand ambiguous loss and how that impacts us as people. But I think they're going through it just like we are, but they don't necessarily have all the same coping strategies or the same words to describe what's going on for them.
Just the physical logistics. You talked about last year having to go to virtual school and then coming back to the classroom this year. That's a big problem for schools around the country. Is there, first of all, a technical problem, just a logistical problem in getting a school ready, shutting it down, bringing it back? And what about the kids as far as gaps in their learning? Are you finding that there are gaps in their learning?
Well, how long do we have for this podcast today, Don? So yes, and I'd be happy to speak to that. And recognizing again that at Harrisburg Academy, we're a small school. And so the challenges that we've been able to face are very, very different than what's happening in large public schools. And so we've been able to find a way to open the doors with a safety plan that says, we have 10 to 13 students in a classroom. They're potted, meaning that they stay with the same kids all day long. The specialist teachers rotate into them. We have mask wearing. We have desks more than 6 feet apart. We have air purifiers in every room. We have outdoor facilities where they can meet and have classes underneath tents. We have all of these things. However, it's just simply not possible in a large public school to have those. I was in a meeting the other day and talking to some superintendents and talking about the mental health of students and how important it is to try to provide more supports, to try to open schools, even things like, to make sure everyone has lunches to eat, right? All these major problems that schools are trying to solve. And everyone wants to be able to open the doors and do it safely. However, if the requirements and the safety requirements remain the same, that we have to have a lot of distance between students to keep them healthy, there's literally not ways to do that, and so when I think about that from a larger systemic way, and I listen to the government's priority to open up schools, and I listen to the Pennsylvania state government's decision to prioritize teachers and the vaccines. Everyone is desperately trying to do everything we can to allow schools to open and to open safely. But the fact still remains that we don't know what's going to happen with the pandemic, and we don't know what's going to happen with the new variants, and we don't know when a vaccine will be ready for the children to take, and so at Harrisburg Academy, we found our way through that. We've been able to open the doors, have the majority of our students choosing to be in person, and haven't had any linked transmission in the school building, meaning we have no evidence that anyone's gotten sick from being in the school. However, that's very specific to our own context, and not other schools have that luxury, quite frankly, right? And so what we're seeing at our school, and this is such a balance. I think about this a lot, is that, we've been able to continue education pretty seamlessly. But we, of course, our kids are having anxiety and stresses, and they're scared. And of course, that's going to impact learning. And if that's going on for our students, we need to take the time out from that math test to be able to talk to them about what's happening and help them through that, right? We have to prioritize that. We have to give each other grace to do that. So we're lucky, that we've been able to keep on learning. But I know in a lot of school districts, it's hard. Failure rates are high. There's fears of gaps in knowledge and what happens next year. We see talks of not requiring standardized tests this year because it just doesn't quite seem fair with everything else going on. When I talk to families, what I say is, we have to be here now for our kids and be in the moment and prioritize our mental and health and our safety, our health and safety, and all of us are in this boat together, so moving forward, both at Harrisburg Academy and the United States educational system is going to have to think really creatively about how to make up some of those losses that have happened over the last year because of the pandemic.
I was going to ask a question about learning loss. There's going to be a moment when the school systems across this land are going to say, okay, we're going to go back to something like the way it was because we're trying to get people accredited and move them on to the next step, to college or to high school. So there's going to be a moment where a certain number of students that have had this learning, sort of this different learning experience, come smack up against the imposition of what it used to be like. Isn't that going to be sort of a shock for everybody? Isn't there going to be a gap to be made up right at the almost immediately?
Well, sure. I mean, I think if we go from this moment to a fall where we are all trying to just go business as usual, it's going to be a pretty big shock. But I also don't necessarily think that's appropriate. And this is just, me talking, but looking at being an educational researcher, reading about what's happening around the world, my personal ethos is one of, in times of great trial and tribulation, there's also times for great opportunity. And it's clear that the American education system has been wrought with inequities and gaps in learning for a very, very long time. And so while the pandemic certainly offers some major challenges, it also is an opportunity to possibly rethink how we do some things, and as I hear it, as I read different educators thinking, I think that everything's on the table right now on what education is going to look like after this, right? Quote unquote, after this. Do we look at what year-round schooling looks like? Do we look at, different work weeks? Do we, like, what options are there? How are we thinking about virtual learning? That's something at Harrisburg Academy that we're talking about. We offer synchronous virtual learning this year that can happen at the same time as our in-person learning happened. It's hard to do. Do we keep on doing that after a pandemic? Now that it's all set up, maybe that's something that we can offer for students who don't want to come here for all their subjects, but would like to take a, accelerated math class here. So there are some opportunities that we have that the pandemic and changes in education will afford us, not to make light of all the challenges at all, right? But I hope educators and policymakers around the country really use this as an opportunity to try to tackle some of those very big inequities that are occurring in the educational system.
And listening to this and thinking about other conversations, that I've had with families, like parents come to mind and they say, what am I going to do about this learning gap for my child? And I, in one hand, I so value that because I know how much they value their child's education, and that alone puts their kid in an advantage point, that, front to an advantage, that their parent is, seriously concerned about their academic progress and what's happening for them in that arena. On the other hand, I also try to encourage the parent to take pause and consider that we are enduring an international pandemic, that this is a trauma experience for us as human beings, that none of us that are alive right now have had any roadmap on how to navigate. And so there's more to attend to than the learning gap. And then, you come back to the prioritization of wanting to make sure, our children are quote unquote on track. But I also think we're surviving something bigger than we've ever understood before. And I have students who will come in. I just was talking to a student this week, and they said, well, my grades are lower than they've ever been, Mrs. Hart. They are lower than they've ever been. And the child was very concerned about this. And so I was trying to help the child have context that when that child, because they were very worried about college admission. And I said, when I need you I was trying to encourage the child to consider when it comes time for application season, in a year and a half from now for them, the whole country's going to be in this position. So it's not like this is a crisis only for the Northeast of the United States. This is everybody is in a position of pause right now, where we're not getting as much as they're accustomed to. And so I think it's going to require all of us to consider the impact of it. And I think one small silver lining is that we're all in it together. We've all been walking this at the same time.
Yeah. And Courtney, I was going to talk to you about this earlier, but you kind of brought it up in what you were just talking about. How's the family interaction going? Are the families just as confused as the students? Do they support what you're doing, or are there some criticisms? Do this better, do that better, that sort of thing?
Yeah, I think that always exists, right? And so, I think about value systems. I think about what we each prioritize within our own units, our family units, the circles we exist in. And I think the truth right now is that people are going to prioritize different things. One family might say, nope. The value system that I hold the highest is, in-person learning. Another family might say, nope. The thing that's the most important to me is the physical safety and limiting the exposure to the virus as much as possible. And I think the important thing that, and if I'm thinking about it through an institutional lens of the academy, I think the thing that we can do is provide access to education irregardless of those value systems. And I don't think it's ours in this moment to decide what those value systems are for families. But I do. Yeah. I think as we've all been experiencing in the last year, people are polarized in all kinds of ways, right? They have very different perspectives on what should be happening. And I think I think that exists in this realm too.
Does it ever get too much for kids? Do you see meltdowns among the students? I keep thinking, if I was in school now, just the sheer weight of what's different and what's scary and what's unknown just must crash down on you sometimes emotionally. Do you, what are you seeing among your students? Are they going to counselors to talk about this, or to you as teachers?
Yeah, absolutely. So I interact the most with our youngest learners from 3-year-olds through fifth grade, and Courtney meets a lot with individuals in the middle and high school ages. And so in the elementary school, I see school at this point for us is has been consistent, so that they know what happens here. They know they can come in their doors and they see their teachers, and they're masked, of course, but their day now is routine, and I think that structure is important for them. But even in the youngest learners, I'll see it so often. It'll come out at maybe unexpected times where I might think like, oh, hey, these kids are doing okay. It happened, in fact, with my own child. Oh, my own kids are doing okay. We but we talk to them. We talk to them in age appropriate ways about what's going on in the world. And my daughter got sick. She got a cold. And we had her masked in the house because we weren't sure at first and wanted to be careful. And she looked up at me with her big eyes and said, Mommy, do you think I have coronavirus? And I said, No, I don't. I don't think you do. And then she said, But even if I do, not everyone dies from coronavirus, right? And here's this kid who, she runs to school, she plays with her brother, like everything is usually all fine, but underneath that current was there, right? And it just, that moment it came out. And so that's what I see in the early childhood and lower school divisions. Mostly kids operating well, but their emotions might be larger. They might react larger to an issue. And we have to remember as adults that there's a lot that they see and they hear, and that will impact them. Courtney, would you like to talk about the middle and high school populations and what you're seeing?
Yeah, and I think in similar ways, Abby, I think that older students too, they don't always have the language to articulate what their concerns are, and even if they do maybe have a language, they might not have the self-awareness to realize that they're being impacted by something, because again, like, I feel like this pandemic is around us like fish are in water, right? This is just what we're living in. And so I think sometimes the lack of the developing self-awareness skills sometimes may lead them to not really know how something is impacting them. So sometimes, behaviors are at the forefront, as they are with any trauma experience. And so, I think part of our role is to try to model how we navigate it, trying to give language, and like Abby said, like, we do talk about things that are happening around us, and we do the same thing with our older students as well, to try to model what it looks like to try to find assurance. But I think also being honest that, I don't want them to get a false sense that like any of us really know exactly what we're doing right now, trying to lean back to the things we do know, trying to open up environments where that we're listening, right? Allowing them to try to express what's happening, because that process of them talking allows them to try to make sense of what's occurring. And so I think it's really a matter of just trying to provide an environment that allows them to express, in appropriate ways, but also when it starts to get to a place that might be maladaptive, trying to help them make sense of why that's occurring for them, I think is just really vital.
What about the teachers? We've heard problems in getting schools started up again on the public school side because teachers are afraid. And as you said, Abby, here in Pennsylvania, the governor has put teachers at the top of the line to get the new Johnson & Johnson vaccine. What are the teachers telling you guys about how they're coping with it and how scared they are?
Definitely, when we were faced with the decision of whether or not we were going to open the doors or not, there's a lot of anxiety, me included. Everyone had to grapple with what that meant, and grapple with their own anxieties and weigh the options. And I think that's been really hard now that we've been in school for a little while, and we've been saying thankfully healthy. I think that some people have felt more comfortable, but it's tomorrow we could find out that someone in the school is sick, and that anxiety is all raised again. Personally, I take some comfort, if you will, perhaps, in the fact that because we're a small organization, and because I'm one of the decision makers, I can implement a really rigorous health and safety procedures and protocols, and make sure they're implemented with fidelity. So whereas when you go out in the grocery store, not everyone has to wear masks. Everyone that walks through this door, which by the way are only teachers and students, they have their masks on. They've had health screenings. If you're sick, even if it's a cold, sometimes even if it's allergies, you're not coming into the building. And that's hard for families to understand. And it's hard for some teachers because in a normal year, they would just come to work if they had a little cold. But this year, it's all of those things layered together that are keeping us safe and allowing us to continue to prioritize the in-person learning. But I don't want to, for a second, downplay how hard it is and how hard it was to come back and how scared people are, like that is existing at the same time as wanting to be back. People have been afraid to be back. Now that we are, I think we're finding our way through it, but it's a real challenge.
And I also want to echo that. I don't want to downplay the anxiety that exists, and I think it spikes in moments where where maybe like someone has where we've had a case where someone has contracted COVID from outside the school, and certainly I feel like it's almost like this thing that we kind of live with, and we're trying to figure out how to carry through. And so I don't want to downplay that, but I will say teachers have openly expressed gratitude for the very concrete and consistent mitigation strategies that the Academy has imposed, and it's just been we've erred on this side of extra caution, and so I think that has provided at times a feeling of, well, this really is hard, but we're going to push through it. We have a board out in the front of our lobby where the kids come in, and I change it periodically. At one point I had a sign above it that said, "What are you grateful for?" And then people could kind of put some notes up there. And some of our faculty members put, I'm grateful for an administration that prioritizes my safety as we're trying to also educate children. And so I do think there's a feeling of that as well, for the gratitude for the mitigation strategies that they're just non-negotiable for us.
Yeah. And I would add, I think this entire experience has made it so clear how complex and fraught the human experience is, right? Not to be too heady, but to hold in one respect, like every time I walk outside of the house, like, yes, there's all right, safety concern, but at the same time, it's also so gratifying to be able to be in my workplace with people that I care about and are supportive and doing something that I love and value. And I think I've also found that many of our educators are holding those two things simultaneously. And being a part of a very close community, I think actually reinforces our safety because people are so aware of how their actions could potentially impact other people. Whereas when we're out running errands, we're out at the grocery store, we don't necessarily always know the people that we're interacting with, or we can feel very other from them if we, don't share the same value system or the same beliefs and views, but here in this small community, it is helpful because we recognize that we're all so interconnected. And so we really work with our students to understand that even if you don't know people, right, even if you are out in the grocery store, we are all interconnected and we all have to rely on each other to do everything we can to get this pandemic to end eventually.
Yes,
eventually. Let's look toward the future now. We're slowly moving into the vaccine phase here of the pandemic. Is that giving any relief to the kids, to the parents, to the teachers to know that the vaccine is coming up? And hand in hand with that, the kids are probably going to be last in line to get this vaccine. They're probably not going to see the vaccine until toward the end of the year after everybody else gets it. So is that causing any anxiety for the kids?
Well, I would happily answer the first one with a resounding yes. I mean, I think that while of course some people have questions about the vaccines and the efficacy rates and all those things that you hear out in the news, I think overwhelmingly people are relieved to know that in the school community that we're going to be able to have access to them if we would like to have access, and what that means towards moving towards getting back to a sense of quote unquote normalcy. So that's very exciting. I even received an email from a parent right after Governor Wolf's announcement saying, if the vaccines happen on a day that's usually a school day, I'm sure the parents won't mind an asynchronous learning day just so all the teachers can get it all at once. So I think that there's also a lot of comfort for the parents to know that hopefully soon their children will be in a school where the teachers and the adults are vaccinated. Courtney, have you heard the students talk at all about the vaccine? I know it has not been a big topic for the younger students, but I know older students, some of them can already qualify. So I don't know if you've heard anything from them.
Yeah, I haven't too much. I mean, there's been a few, I've had some of our older students have popped by and said, Mrs. Hart, like I hear you're going to be able to get the vaccine soon because they're following the news and things. And so I think there's some energy around that of feeling hopeful about adults around them being able to, become vaccinated. The sense that I get is that they know they're down the line and so that's the reality for them. But I will say, and I'm going to say this in a very broad general way, of course, there's always nuance to these things, but when talking with students, their own health doesn't tend to be the thing they're most worried about. It tends to be the health of adults around them or people that they know are vulnerable. And so I don't see them as panicked about their own impact here as much as how much they might be able to impact other people who could have an intense response to the COVID virus.
Interesting.
Well, hey, thanks very much. We're running out of time here. I know you guys have got to go back to your school duties, but thanks for taking some time out to talk to us about this. Abby Mahone and Courtney Hart of the Harrisburg Academy. We'll keep an eye on this too, because as I said, we're just entering the vaccine phase and schools plan to reopen across the country, public schools, the way you guys have. So I'm sure that there'll be all sorts of twists and turns that we can follow as this goes by. Thanks very much for being here, guys.
Thank you so much.
Have a good day. Bye-bye. Thank you again.
And thank you for listening to the Musical Innertube. Now, if you'd like to get in touch with us, the email address is musicalinnertube, all one word, @gmail.com. On Twitter, John is @JTimpain and Don is @DonRooney9. Our webpage is Musical Innertube, that's musical spelled with two A's, .libsyn, spelled LIBSYN.com. The Innertube is available on Amazon Music, Facebook, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, SoundCloud, iHeartRadio podcasts. Like us and give us a good review on any of those platforms. And if you head on over to musicalinnertubeplayers.libsyn.com, check out the adventures of our beloved Father Hardy during the month of St. Patrick. And as always, thanks to virtual band Car Radio Dog for our theme music.